It's no problem. When Felipe come, if he can't get him, even though I sent Rudel his link and everything. I mean his name, his number, everything. He could use my phone.
Okay. So good evening. It's welcome to the Cultural and Heritage Standing Committee of the Sixth Constitutional Convention. I don't see any other member of this standing committee except Delegate Hendricks. I'd like to welcome delegates Rudel A. Hodge Jr. and Imani Daniel. And we're getting down. We're getting down. I'm so happy for this. We're waiting for our guest, who is Felipe Ayala. He's traveling to the site. In the meantime, we can probably wait a few minutes to see what other member comes on. I don't know where Ronald is, if he's back on St. Croix or if he's still off island. I haven't heard from Devin. He's usually on here a half hour before, so I hope everything is all right with him. And I haven't heard from Akima also, so we'll wait a couple of minutes before we continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, I know we're enjoying that music because I am. It's
I was about to say,
6:05.
man, I was
I'm
about
sorry.
to I was about to say, man, you're growing up.
I hope it was as good as the music that you had at Victor's Hideout with the credit union Friday night.
Oh, that was a lovely affair.
Yeah, I saw pictures.
Come
I
in,
saw.
open the door.
So we have nobody else on, so I guess we'll just start doing work until the others come on. Um,
Felipe just got here.
oh, wonderful. Let him have a
Did you
something
get
cold
on?
to drink, and then we'll have him come on.
Messenger. Press the message.
It seems like tonight we're going to take care of Article 14, Section 4, 5, 6, and 7. So we should be able to finish that and be on our way. And I'd like to really thank Delegates Rudell A. Hards Jr. and Delegate Imani Daniel for all the work that they've done. In fact, we were able to use some of our information from last week's meeting at the Human Rights um, Standing Committee meeting a few days ago. So thank you, thank you, thank you. While Mr. Ayala is catching his breath, um, as a delegate Daniel, I would like to say, what was one good thing that happened to you today, Rudel?
You want to hold on for another few minutes, right, Miss Wells?
Yes, he can get himself together and we'll just continue.
I'm going to let him go outside so he could be refreshed.
Delegate Daniel,
Yes, and
what's
just
one good thing that happened to you today?
well, I had an executive committee meeting, so nothing.
Oh, okay. Almost like coming to this sixth constitutional convention, huh?
Listen,
And the
easy out
plenary
there,
session.
okay? But I will just say the language that we brought over to human rights was yesterday, Delegate Wells. The time
Yes,
is
oh gosh.
creeping and speeding and distorted, and I'll just be so grateful and thankful when we're done with drafting.
Yes. Yes. Do you know, or can you probably don't know, they probably did it behind your back, but anyway, do we have our attorney yet to look over everything that we've done, all the committees, or not yet?
I have not heard of any nominations or selections of legal counsel.
I guess we'll look forward to hearing more on that on the 2nd of August.
Yes, and I urge you to bring that up as well as the need for an executive director. I can say that we've made some movement as far as media goes, but nothing of the core functions.
Okay, I'm seeing Miss Ayala. Hi, Felipe. How are you?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Thanks for
afternoon.
having me.
Thank
Good
you for
afternoon.
accepting. I'm going to let Delegate Hendricks do some introductions of you, and then you'll just continue. And I'll tell you what we want from you. So,
I don't know if I'm too close to Mrs. Hendricks, but it's starting to do something.
Okay,
no,
let me move away from him. I'm going to go in another room.
Please forgive me, everyone. I'm low tech.
we all are except for Rudell and Imani.
No, just
We're in
Rudell.
good
You'll fit
company.
right in.
That's not true, Felipe. The only thing that I'm going to say about
Yes.
Mr. Ayala is that everything that he knows, he learned from me.
Oh, okay.
I was his 5th grade teacher, and I introduced him to many things.
Miss Hendricks is doing the same thing.
I'm not far enough.
No, you're good. You're doing good.
Oh, I don't know.
No, you
Yes.
just be quiet, Felipe, and she'll speak, and then you'll speak.
Felipe has always been very much interested in Virgin Islands history. From the age of, I guess, maybe 8 or 9, he first started out in the Hibiscus Society, and he grew all kinds of hibiscus. Every day he would bring a different color one for me at school. And he grew, and he was part of the Historic Trust. Anything that is cultural, he is a part of, but he will do a better job telling you about himself. And I'm so proud of him. He's one of my favorite persons, my son, as we call each other. I'm his mom, and that's my son. So I'm so proud to introduce Mr. Felipe Ayala to you all this evening.
Good afternoon, Felipe.
Good. Thank you so much for that. Thank you. Ms. Hendricks, everything she said was true. I love history and I love these islands. I was taught at a very early age to stand up for them. My godmother, Gwendolyn Ken, when I was 5 years old, used to take me around. I had to sit in the corner of all these old homes, enjoying furniture and sit there quietly. And I was actually quite bored. But I used to ask myself, why am I doing this? But then when I got of age, I realized that all those conversations, all those things that she shared with me were for a reason. And it was about preserving for the next generation as her generation passes down to me. And it was just something I've learned to appreciate historic architecture. I learned to appreciate antique furniture and all things Virgin Islands. And it prepared me for meeting my preservation mentor, which was Edith de Young Woods. And I sat on the right hand of Edith Woods for my first year at the commission. She and I did a inventory of every historic structure on St. Thomas, St. John. And we cataloged them for the government, which did not have an inventory of all these historic structures. Charlotte Amalia is fortunate to have over 400 historic buildings, more than any other city in the United States per square mile. So it's something that we take for granted, but we shouldn't. I could talk about historic preservation all day because it's something very dear to me. And I think it's a missed opportunity as Virgin Islanders not preserving our historic districts and historic cultures more. We like to say as political people that we support preservation. It's a political buzzword, but our actions show totally different. And during my tenure as chairman of the Historic Preservation Commission, I served 2 times. The first year during Mrs. Wood's tenure as chairwoman, I served for 4 years during the Snyder administration. And then Governor Turnbull, who removed me from the commission, also put me back, and I served for 20 years after that. And I was a very tough chairman. I will not say that I wasn't, because you have to stand up for historic preservation. People feel that if you lose something, oh, we can just build it over, we'll make it look pretty. That's not what it's about. It's about preserving original fabric. And we owe it to our ancestors, whether we like slavery or not, for people who did not have, and I'm putting this in air quotes, the skill set to build these things that have lasted for over 300 years. So I'll start there.
Wonderful. Now you really need to continue because you've piqued my interest, especially Back Street in St. Thomas. I noticed that has just gone to the dogs, that we would say. What is happening there?
Well, during my tenure, we looked at the enlargement of the historic district, and I'll let the board know that the historic district starts in the middle of the harbor. It goes up onto the 3 hills. The city of Charlotte Amalia is built on 3 hills divided by 2 natural gutters, and then divided again into quarters, which are Danish subdivisions. And Governor Turnbull enlarged the district by making the architectural control district, which was just a little bit of the harbor, Main Street, waterfront, Back Street, to now encompassing the National Historic District, which takes the district up onto all 3 hills. To the entire Charlotte Amalia, from the Fredericksburg Estate, which is below Blue Bear's Castle, to include the castle, all the way to 1 block below the Catholic Cathedral, now encompassing the cemeteries, and all the way up onto the tops of the 3 hills. Black Bears up into Lytton's Fancy, around by the stadium, up onto Catherinesburg, and down into Cronprinson's quarters. So the entire downtown Charlotte Amalia is a historic district. We also have districts on St. John and Christiansted and Frederickstead on St. Croix. In terms of Backstreet, there is a big revitalization effort, but at times people use these words too lightly. They feel that if you painted a color, you add some barge board or gingerbread, it's historic. No, there's some buildings that were plain, and I fought with a lot of people, and I will use the word fight, because it is a struggle every time, from governors on down, and including the current one. They talk a lot of things about historic preservation, but they really don't understand what historic preservation is. I listen to speeches and buildings that they cite. Everybody's looking at, I call it Joe's, but the new building right across from the Grand Hotel that was recently renovated. There's a difference between renovation and restoration. And restoration is about original fabric. I know the cost of restoration is very expensive today. I just remodeled my parents' home, and there's no difference in the cost of a new structure compared to a historic one. I mean, it's the same amount of money you're going to spend on windows and doors. What people fail to realize here is that what you do with these historic structures affects everything. It affects your tourism bottom line, because people are not coming here to see what they left behind. They're coming to see something authentic. So it affects preservation. Think about it this way: as a UNESCO designation, we had the opportunity to be a UNESCO World Heritage Site if we had 2/3 of our original fabric, which we pissed away. And I'm going to be very strong in language, so please humor me, but we really pissed it away. So we missed an opportunity. And during my tenure as chairman, people will come from Key West, St. Kitts, Grenada, Dominica, to study what not to do with their historic preservation. Virgin Islanders have a belief that we're the leaders in the industry, we're the leaders in everything, but at times we become the laughing stock for having so much that's God bless, that we piss it away because we feel we have beaches, we have districts, we have a beautiful harbor, but other people are looking at us as what not to do with those attributes and developing their own. And it's something that I ask boards, I ask government to be very sensitive with. From historic furniture to, we talk about the Pizarros, we talk about all of these things. Camille Pizarro, the father of French Impressionism, is our most famous painter. Everybody would celebrate this gentleman for his accomplishments for creating an art movement. His birthplace is on our main street. He attended our synagogue. How many people know that? His birthplace is a ruin right now. But any other place in the world, if you have an artist of that magnitude, you would celebrate him. You would have a draw. We talk a big thing about the Pizarros at Government House. Where are they? Have they been returned to St. Thomas? They're in St. Croix. Why they're in St. Croix this long is another question. But these are things that should be part of our heritage. These are things that we should be celebrating. This is the core of historic preservation.
Well, let me stop you right there, Felipe. There are some questions. Imani, do you want me to read them or do you want to ask yourself?
I am just, well, one, thank you so much. This is incredibly engaging. I'm Delegate Imani Daniel. I have seen your work. I have been in several homes that you have curated and decorated. I think of some of your friends or family,
Thank
and
you.
I think it's beautiful. So I don't want to interrupt your flow or the conversation. I'm just putting some questions in the chat as you go, so I can ask them now, or I can finish your presentation, whatever is better for you, Mr. Ayala.
I'm very easy, so jump right in and let me know, and I'll answer them as we go along.
Okay, so the first question should be fairly easy. You were talking about working with Miss Woods back in the day, and that you all inventoried around or over 400 historic buildings in St. Thomas, St. John. I was curious if you know where that inventory list lives today and how it can be accessed.
The inventory was divided into the quarters, so each book, and we created a textbook for it, is in the Historic Preservation Office. You can go to Sean Krieger, who is the State Historic Preservation Officer, and currently the associate that would handle the historic district has retired. They have not replaced Patton Mulford's job as yet, but the three books are in there. And what we did was not only I had to literally go to each building and write an inventory of it, but we also did the research in the Record of Deeds office and attached those records to those deeds. So they're public records. You can go into the commission. You cannot remove the book from the office, but you should be able to sit there and go through any information for the buildings that are listed.
Very cool.
And we did that because the DPNR did not have an accurate recording of all our historic buildings. As much as we did that over 25 years ago, the district inventory needs to be updated every year because things change as a result of hurricanes, fires, and other things. So it's a document that needs to be updated every year.
Let me just jump in here. When you, excuse me, when you mentioned Sean Krieger, I think last meeting I had read it in the consortium or on the source about Mr. Krieger in pressing upon somebody in St. Croix. He wanted to knock this building down. I was near the seaplane, and he was convincing them that although it was their building, their mother had left it to them, the history would be preserved if they would build whatever structure they anticipated in the front of the building, because there was enough land there, and go and get funding to remodel the structure. He really, I said, I've never even heard anyone of anybody of any stature in the Virgin Islands convincing somebody to keep a building, get
Yeah.
money, rebuild it, refurbish it rather than knock it down. So I mentioned Sean Krieger last week. Yes.
What
Oh,
history, once it's gone forever. And that's
true.
something that people don't realize. If you go to 1960 and institute historic preservation as a way of life, think about where we would be as a destination. Curacao, you close your eyes and you sail into Curaçao's harbor, and you know you're automatically there based on a color scheme. My godmother, Mrs. Ken, used to tell me that when she left for Chicago and sailed out of Charlotte Amalia's harbor, she looked back and all she could remember were white buildings with red roofs, which were trademarked to Government Hill. It's something that parts of Government Hill still has, but we allow people now to come in with these warm Caribbean colors. You might not think that the Danish West Indian color scheme for Charlotte Amalia was vibrant and energetic, but it was so unique to the Virgin Islands, to the Caribbean, that you knew you were here, even if you didn't know where you were, just by that color scheme. It's the same thing if you go to the Greek Isles, you'll know you're there because of the white with that particular shade of blue. But these are things that brand our island and brand our communities. But we're so quick to just adopt what everybody else is doing. Point taken. As a commission chair, everybody wanted a new color scheme for downtown. They wanted these bright Caribbean colors, things that Ricardo Alegria did in Puerto Rico in Old San Juan's district. Keep in mind that Ricardo Alegria came in 1970, did a huge presentation to the Virgin Islands government on saving our district. Ariel Melchior wrote his famous article about Main Street being a monoxide canyon, talking about what we can do to reinvent our island. And yet, from 1917 until 2025, we're still discussing that same argument as what to do. We had our golden period again. Everybody was making lots of money in the 80s. But now look, that very main street has more abandoned buildings, more closed shops than ever before. But we missed an opportunity in terms of branding our downtown as a historic district with a shopping destination in it, as opposed to being just strictly a shopping district fueled by high rents. Main Street rents were on par to Fifth Avenue at one point in our history, and everybody was making money, but we weren't looking at our product. We were not reinventing our downtown, but you have ports like St. Kitts that came in, studied our duty-free models, went back and built a dock to accommodate larger cruise ships because they wanted to go after that. They took their sugar train and they made it a tourism draw. So now people are bypassing. I'm sitting on Mrs. Hendricks' porch and I'm watching the ships pull out. There was a time when I was a kid. You have 5 big ships in the harbor. Now we have a larger class of cruise ships, but they don't stay as long. They don't embrace the island, but 2 days a week, Tuesdays and Wednesdays. But we miss sharing with them our historic district because we add second stories, we close in the courtyards, we cover over historic step streets. And all of a sudden now we're realizing, oh, we're losing all of this. So let's reinvent our town. Let's look at all of these things. We slap some paint on a few buildings, change some windows to suit a need, but we miss what was originally there.
Like, Imani,
It's
you
something
want
that
to
you
talk
have
about
to fight for.
this historic district? Imani, you had a question, comment?
Yes. And I greatly appreciate this because I've inherited some properties on Garden Street that I am renovating and I am now inspired to restore them instead. So this is such a timely conversation. So the second question I had was, what does historic district mean? Now, I know that there are some development regulations here, but I wonder if there are some other designations that we can draw pride or inspiration from by having the biggest historic district per capita or per square footage in the U.S.
Well, definitely having that designation is in other societies something prideful. Most societies have one or two historic buildings in their downtown, but we have an entire downtown with seven historic churches. We have fortifications, historic gutters, sidewalks, all the bells and whistles that every other town would want. And then to top it off, Green Hills above it, and one of the few perfect harbors, natural harbors in the Caribbean. St. Thomas has a designation of being a free port since the 1700s when Christian realized that the island wasn't suited for that much agriculture, but based on his position in the Lesser Antillean chain and our perfect harbor, we can access trade, and trade is what has drawn everybody to Charlotte Amalia. I mean, you can go back from historic times to Charles Lindbergh landing here, beating up Puerto Rico for that designation. Everybody passes through St. Thomas at one point or the other in their life. And as a Virgin Islander, and the Virgin Islands as a whole, I'm not limiting this to just St. Thomas. You have two historic districts on St. Croix, hundreds of sugar plantations, and then the jewel in the crown, St. John. So you have it all, but do we really appreciate it? And when you stand up for these things, and to take the abuse, and I will say abuse that I fought back, but at the legislature, in government circles, for standing up for these things. Oh, you don't know what you mean. Now that the bottom is falling out of it, now everybody's looking at historic preservation and, oh, we should do it. And we love to say historic, but we don't understand this. Point taken, Richard Treehouse, who is an international financier, he died. He was a member of the National Trust for Historic Preservation. He was a champion for our historic district. And yes, he had more money than God. However, one of the things that he tried to do was create legislation called the form-based codes that would help people as they redevelop downtown to protect these buildings, because a lot of senators, we did the inventory, which was a big deal for branding and saving the historic district, but the final nail in that coffin, the senators would not act on because they didn't want to vote in to protect these buildings. Richard Treehouse's funding the form-based codes would show DPNR that if you build buildings, that window details, hip roofs, all of these structures that would make our district stronger will go into play. He spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, maybe more, on developing these codes, but to pass them at the legislature, they sit there. So are we really serious about historic preservation? And to really top that off, you had, in that time, Democratic controlled presidencies of the United States. Now you have Trump. These things are not important to him. And we're looking at financing for, somebody mentioned earlier about restoring a building and looking at public funds. There's no public monies really to help you to do this. There are a little bit of money in the block grant and things like that. But when we had money to do it, we weren't promoting historic preservation.
Let's just take a breather. Thank you. Oh, this is so interesting. I could listen to this all night. I'd like to welcome Delegate Member Akima Richardson, Delegate Liliana Belado de O'Neill, and Rudel, you can ask your question, and then I'll go to Imani because she has some more also.
Thank you so much for the very enlightening conversation about preservation and historical context of the Virgin Islands. I do have a question, which is, what relevant laws, territorial and internationally, can you remember that affects historic preservations in the territory? And how can we best bring some of the best practices from those laws into this constitution, in your professional opinion?
One of the things, if you look at Governor Turnbull's creating the enlarged historic district, by doing that, it gave the Historic Commission greater powers in terms of regulating activities and building development. One of the things that the Historic Commission does is, by law, it has oversight for anything you do, from cutting a tree to painting a building to changing a roof profile, adding, destroying, whatever, to a historic building. One of the greatest things about that legislation is it needs to be enforced. You have a regulatory agency that does not have regulation powers. So it's like, yes, we have the the ability to do these things, but we don't have enforcement. So the law at that point, as you base it by Charleston standards, by Georgia, any of the major preservation cities in the South, New Orleans, we're very lax in terms of what we allow compared to them. But one of the things that we miss as Virgin Islanders are the economic controls that these towns give. Charleston makes so much money from historic preservation and historic tourism that they pay a rebate to their taxpayers for restoring buildings to maintain a structure that allows historic preservation to flourish and grow, and that becomes a draw internationally to their districts. We could have been that in the Caribbean, but we chose not to do it. Puerto Rico, on the other hand, under Alegria's stewardship, they started to do that. So these are laws that we need to tighten up in the district to continue. Most of the laws that affect historic preservation are always tabled for further discussion because the powers that would give the commission to regulate these building developments, people don't want, because they want to be able to do what they want to do with their property as a property owner, not realizing that if they took care of historic preservation, they would attract more money because more people would come to your base to see it.
Great. What would you like to see in this sixth constitution in terms of cultural preservation, you personally?
For me, it's to take it seriously. No is an option for me, Mrs. Wells. If you're not serious about this, then say no. Piss it away if that's what you choose. Choose 5 buildings that you want to preserve, which I think is really a bad idea. But I'd rather do that than have all the good intentions about how we care about history and culture and all of these things, knowing that all of our actions do exactly the opposite. There's more to being a Virgin Islander than saying good morning every day.
Thank you very, very much. Any other delegate or member would like to ask or mention something to Mr. Ayala Jr.? Welcome, Akima. Would you like to say something? Akima is a member of our standing committee. Member Liliana Bilardo de O'Neill is a delegate. Would you like to ask or say something to Mr. Ayala?
Can you hear me?
Now
Yes.
I can.
Okay, my concern, Mr. Anjala, is that when they proposed the preservation law to bring it to what it used to be, it was very costly, very expensive for the property owners, and they in turn could not bring back those properties back to what it used to be a long time ago, and especially the Frederickstead area. I mean, it's so depressing to see those beautiful buildings falling down apart because they can't touch them unless they go through that preservation legislation that was passed, and it would be too expensive for them to do that. Would you suggest the senators repealing that law or coming up with something that would help the owners of those properties to rebuild them to what they used to be, beautiful buildings? They're still standing up but falling apart.
I think people use cost as a reason for why they don't want to fix buildings. As a property owner, you're faced with a choice. You can either live for your building and save it, or you can abandon them to historic fates. In that regard, there was a whole discussion by the Realtors Board about restoration and cost. People use the cost of historic preservation as a lie. And I'm going to be very honest with you, because all the things that can be put into fixing a building through the offices like the State Historic Preservation Office are never addressed. People are always quick to say about how expensive it is. And when I opened this dialogue, I talked to you about just fixing my parents' home recently. It's a modern house, 50 years old, which technically 50 years old gives it a historic connotation, but it still costs $180,000 for a modern building. Yes, a historic building might have cost $200,000, but there's really not that difference in terms of modern construction to historic construction. I have a big argument with a friend that always talks about raising a historic building. It'll be cheaper to build it over. My parents' home is not that old. It was not that cheaper to knock it down. It still costs the same amount. But what a government needs to do is look at the cost of building. Concrete is $261 a yard. So whether it's historic or modern, it's still going to cost you a minimum of $20,000 to do something. So it's not about looking at what historic costs so much. Modern buildings cost that much. You have to look at the fact that these buildings have endured. Look at hurricanes. FEMA studied all of Charlotte Amalia's historic architecture and did their codes not only for the Virgin Islands but for the entire country based on our historic architecture. Because and when you look across from Hugo to Maryland to Irma Maria, 2/3 of our historic structures survived where more modern buildings were damaged because in those days, Danish West Indian architects and our architectural heritage is really Caribbean Georgian, which is English. I mean, they didn't know about FEMA. They didn't have that. They knew about cutting overhangs off, building shed roofs separate from main house, symmetry of doors and windows, hip roofs so air can flow through. All of these things they perfected. Rubble walls. Well, we get these buildings, we suck the life out of them, and then when they don't seem to financially benefit us anymore, then we talk about the cost of fixing them and how we can knock something down and become a new building. It's that mindset that I want the commission to start thinking about what is our heritage. If we talk about historic preservation and culture, are we really supporting it? The people that made this culture great live somewhere. And when you think of our historic district, it's fairly new. When you put it against buildings in Europe or Africa, these 300-year-old buildings are fairly new. Other towns successfully restore theirs and use it as a financial draw to bring people to see it.
All
We
right.
constantly miss opportunities here.
Imani, your comment about architecture?
Yes, thank you. I'm putting these in the chat as well, but I'll read it. So I said that your focus seems to be on architecture, which I think is fantastic. But my question was, who are the other yous for the other parts of our culture, like storytelling, food, music, language, right? Like, where do we find this institutional knowledge? How do you all organize as kind of the culture bearers? How can we continue this conversation?
I would say join the St. Thomas Historical Trust. We're an advocacy for those very things you spoke about. The Historic Preservation Commission, of which I chaired, it's a government agency. So you're basing the government's need to, or they say their need to protect these things by creating a structure for it. The St. Thomas Historical Trust is a private organization dedicated to these same things. Luana Wheatley is our current president, and I'm the education chair. A lot of what we do is the focus from the commission is based on architectural heritage, but all these other things, storytelling, chats, are things that the private organizations handle, up street, down street, all the different groups have. We take basically, because there's so much, we all take different parts of it and we try to protect and promote that. One of the things that Luana Wheatley, as the current president of the St. Thomas Historical Trust, does is she takes a little bit of that every quarter. In 2 weeks, we're about to celebrate the reopening of Blackbeard's, and we're going to have a cocktail hour, once again reintroducing people to our historic district and seeing different ways of promoting it. We do things with step streets. We do a cooking thing. We did a coaling workshop. We have literally restored Hassel Island to the point that DPRNR and the federal government, to the Friends of the Park, come to the trust for its leadership capabilities in restoring all the structures on Hassel Island. We cold pot cook-off. I'm trying to think of all the step streets. The step streets right now are being celebrated with Anna Monica, but St. Thomas has 47 of them, more than any other island in the Caribbean. Puerto Rico has 1, Grenada has 3, 47 of them. We promote the 99 steps, and we take $150,000, now has ballooned to $750,000, and the step streets still aren't open. We did Dronigan's Step Street most recently, and we just about completed Bread Gata. Bread Gata has 147 steps. We've landscaped them, we've fixed the stairs, we've done all that, and we barely spent $150,000, which is privately raised. So if government is serious about these things, put your money where your mouth is.
One of the persons in our chat, Mr. Richardson, good afternoon, Mr. Richardson, he said, my fear becomes a knowledge of purpose disappears when an entire generation, now bordering on 2 and brushing on a 3rd, and all of this knowledge means nothing to a youth who has not heard it. What would you comment on that?
Education. This is where the Department of Education fails. When I was in high school, 9th grade, Erla Wilkinson was my history teacher, and Mrs. Torres. My introduction to historic preservation as a high school student came again with Mrs. Torres, who brought Myron Jackson up to our class. He did a presentation, and he brought the district alive to us, so slide presentations, all this stuff. But these things were taught in school. My mother was a lover of history and was a teacher. I could not avoid this stuff in school. Every field trip she went on, and before you went on a field trip, you had to tell Mrs. Ayala and Mr. what you're going to see. You had to do your own homework. I couldn't get away from them. It wasn't something in those days I was proud of, but now I realize the foundation that my parents were planting in with me. It started at home. It was further developed in school through history programs. We taught, we had Maypole and Quadrille, and everybody at Muller School had to participate in this. The entire school was in Carnival, but parents took an active role in this. They taught us who we were. And my parents, being lovers of history, said, if you didn't know your history, you were doomed to repeat it. This is where I think school, they talk about the new curriculum and the new textbooks that they're writing, but these things have to be promoted. In high school, my art teachers, we drew pictures of buildings and step streets. I can't draw, but these are things that they brought us out to see and expose us to. I remember Mrs. Mopin talked about cultural things. Our entire class had to go and stand up at the Emancipation Garden when they were trying to develop a hotel at Megan's Bay. We were taught to be active. I was from the graduating class of 1987, and we took to excel always, the motto of my high school, very seriously. Everybody had to do well. We took different areas of it, and our parents backed us up.
Okay, Doug, the Commandant Garda site, which was used as a day adult education, and now there's nothing being done there. Is there any planned activities to be taking place there, Commandant Garda site over at as you go up Garden Street?
Yes, I'm very familiar. It's a classic example of a Charlotte Meyer town residence complete without buildings. But when you look at the Department of Education and the properties that they own, and not singling out the department, but just the government as a whole, Catonsburg is still a ruin. Jarvis School is now being worked on, but that has been a ruin, and we cite money all the time. I remember just simple maintenance. There's a ficus tree growing out of the side of the building. We do have maintenance departments. Cut that tree down. Oh, it's just a small little thing. Well, it grows into a major tree and then pulls the building down, and it causes you more damage. You have to think historic preservation is about maintenance the same way you would do a modern building. If you have a tree growing out of your modern house's gutter, you'd remove it because you wouldn't collect water. But we close all these buildings up. The government as a whole is the worst landlord, because they don't take care of anything. I hate to just rag there on people that work in government that are concerned, but their hands are tied, and we always talk about money. Yet we're getting ready for Carnival. We can repave a parking lot. We can do everything because Carnival is a big cultural draw. What happens after Carnival? These buildings are still there.
The coming
The parking
down,
lot's still not open.
I don't want to hog the conversation because I have many questions, but coming down Bunker Hill, the foot of the hill where Miss Andrews, Vivian Andrews.
Yes, one of the 16 stone and brick buildings, which is another thing, Ms. Weldon, not to cut you, but we have 16 of that style buildings. The old hospital, the tourism office is in one of them. There's 16 stone and brick buildings using native stone trimmed with yellow ballast brick. The first one was built in 1848, which is the Anglican Cathedral. It's also the same year as the emancipation of slavery. So former slaves, now freed, worked under George Tucker's guidance to build that monumental church. And as a result of that, they quarried stones in those areas and created 16 of those buildings, which are unique to Charlotte Amalia. But do we celebrate any of that? No.
No. And my last question, because I'm going to give somebody else a chance, that Louise and Hoy Castle that we see in so much of, that's up for sale.
Yes.
What's your take on
I was
that?
there today. Louise and Hoy was built by Arthur Fairchild in 1914. The gatehouse, or was Charles's house, it literally is a gatehouse for the castle. It's built on the foundations of the old Megan's estate. And the Megan family owned the three estates surrounding it, Zufriedenheit, Canaan, and Louise and Hoy. So Arthur Fairchild built this architectural folly, which is now owned by the DuPont family, but the gatehouse was always separate. I heard a conversation online one time when Gabby posted it that the government should buy that, and I scoffed at it. And I kind of feel that these buildings stand a chance if they stay in private hands worth further than government hands, because, I mean, we talk about how important Catharines is, and we have parties there all the time, but the house is basically a ruin. When I was a kid, I would go to see the Yawns there with Mrs. Woods. Friends of Denmark had meetings there. The house is gorgeous. The government owns it. We spent $5 million on 2 restoration phases, and now it's a ruin again. That's what I'm talking about.
I understand. Akima, member Akima Richardson has a question. Would you say I'll read your comment in the chat?
Yes. Can you hear me, Delegate Wells?
Yes, I can.
Okay, great. So I'm curious to know what suggestions are available to handle the derelict buildings that are often in the historic district. And I'm wondering, do you support the government stepping in to facilitate preservation of these abandoned structures?
2-part question. For me, the first part on government, I believe in leadership by example. So the government needs to take care of its own buildings before they can talk about anybody else's derelict buildings, because they own a lot of them. So if they would step up with that, then it would give impetus to people who are trying to save their own buildings. In terms of derelict buildings, families need to get together. A lot of times, the issues that we found at the Historic Commission was that the building is owned by several people, a lot of them times going through probate. The court's probate system was backed up. I heard that there are 3 new judges are going to be appointed just for probate, and that would free up ownership of the buildings. Families that are large families or multiple owners of a building need to put the buildings in a trust. They need to not be caught up as who's paying the taxes or whatever. Let the trust handle it, and then the buildings can be freed. If you cannot afford to maintain a building, you're faced with a choice. Either you pass it on to somebody that can, or the trust can get loans or whatever to be able to save the building. But to sit there and watch the building deteriorate because people are fighting as to who is paying the taxes, who will get what share of it, what we can get for taxes of it, or income from rent. These are the things that kill the district. So in the meantime, everybody else's property is ran down because of these derelict things. There was a discussion with the realtors board about fixing a lot of these buildings or getting the buildings up for sale, and the Senate was feeling that you're trying to take property away from local people, but local people are running neighborhoods down. And if you're not going to be able to fix your building, at least board it up. The fire department has a schedule in which they will help you or teach you how to board it up from vagrants. And St. Croix, Nanette Daria painted all her derelict buildings in Times Square a particular shade of gray. She painted them. Nadine Marchena did it similarly on St. Thomas. And we looked at these buildings awaiting restoration. They were all painted out of cheap gray paint. It's a color that you notice, but you don't notice. Nadine went as far as hiring Gray Po to paint shutters and closed areas, so the neighborhoods don't look run down. Virgin Islanders like to talk about sweeping the yards when they were kids and cleanliness, but we're dirty. I hate to admit it, but the evidence is there. You drive down, we had a thing in the paper the other day about raw sewage downtown. All of these things kill momentum for people who want to invest into downtown. If you can't even keep the sewer by the greenhouse where there's a restaurant flush, or down by the labor department, uh, these are the things that are killing your town. In the meantime, property owners have to just, whether the property is derelict or not, they have to take care of it. Close it up, keep it painted, take the trees out of it. These things will stabilize the building and help the appearance of your town until you can do the monies to restore them. If you go to the States, you have an HOA that will say if your grass is over X number of inches, you have to cut it. But we don't do that here. If the grass grows high, a tree grows out of it, oh well, it's an old house. It's a building awaiting restoration.
Ooh,
It's the same way we deal with trash here. I mean, you put up a no trash sign and people still dump the things there. At the end of the day, we're running our own towns down and we have to hold people accountable. It is not just for government to come in and fix all these things. We have to take the impetus as outstanding Virgin Islanders and say, no, we've had enough, and take our towns back.
agreed.
Thank you, Mr.
Members,
Ayala.
That's a good note for us to give Felipe a break. I would just like to give him some kudos and say to you all, he continues to do walking trips on Main Street, up those steps that he's talking about, with tourists almost 3 and 4 a month. Felipe also, he gets a melt down if they cut down a mahogany tree or some other tree. I mean, he goes like off. Felipe's house
You know,
is
they're
a
gifts to
museum.
us.
Felipe's house is a museum. I mean, when you enter that place, you know that you are in St. Thomas that we used to know. Mahogany beds, everything in Felipe house is wood, mahogany. None of these newfangled things, but beautiful. And I am inviting all of you to visit so that maybe we could make a difference in our own homes. Stop buying junk. He spent thousands of dollars yearly buying wooden furniture. He goes in the garbage, he gets them, he restores them. I mean, it's just fabulous.
well,
Thank
I'm
you.
looking forward to the invitation.
I will say this to the board, though. I think in light of this conversation, if you can organize yourself, I would love to take you out into the historic district and show you what I see and show you the very best of it. And you'll understand why I'm so passionate. I hate that I sound in conversations like this very aggressive. It's my inner Edith. I always tell everybody that in conversations like this, Edith Woods consumes me, because these are things that she fought about. She talked about when she was a child growing up in Dion Gut and walking through the gutters, and it was clean. Like, these are things that could be tourism draws. Charlotte Amalia is built like an Italian step town. It's stepped up onto the hills with views onto the harbors. All those buildings are built to the street facades, so they're courtyards and wonderful things in the back. We don't promote this. We don't, I hate to say at times you don't have the sophistication to recognize that this is the very best of it. Yet we'll go to Europe, we'll travel all over, and we'll see all this stuff and never realize we have the same things here. And this is what we should be promoting.
Well, I'd like to really thank you, and I'm going to follow up, excuse me, and have probably Imani Daniel, who's the secretary of the 6th Constitutional Convention, probably call or email or text to get with you, and probably Delegate Hendricks. And I'll enjoy having a tour. I would really like that. I've walked up the 99 stairs because coming from all things, I've done that. But I know that there's so many other areas that truly we need to visit. And I'm this opening of Black Beard's Castle. I've only been up there once when Kay Bailey and Pat Bailey lived in that area, but I think that's something we need to do. So I'd like to thank you very, very much. I'd like to thank all the members and the delegates. And if you have any closing remarks or question for Ms. Ayala Jr., if we'll do that now. Oh, you're going to have to come back. I don't know when, but we're going to have you back. So members, do you have any closing concerns, questions? Now's the time.
Just deep gratitude for your lived experience and for the way that you share it with others so candidly. I just
Thank you.
benefited so greatly from your presentation, and I do hope that we can continue this. So thank you so much. And thank you, Delegate Hendricks, for facilitating, and thank you, Delegate Wells, for creating the space.
You're quite welcome. And
You're welcome.
Delegate Hendricks,
Thank
please
you.
be sure Felipe gets some good coconut water like you had then. Thank you so much, Felipe.
You're most welcome.
All right.
I appreciate all that you are doing and making this an issue. One of the things with historic preservation is that we never get heard. All you hear from historic preservation is that we said no, but nobody ever asks why we said no. We are charged by the government, and this will be my closing statement. We are charged by the government of the Virgin Islands to protect and preserve the historic structures of the Virgin Islands. And when we try to do so, we become the bad person. So tell me what you want this to be.
Preserve.
Yeah, thank you.
Protect.
Thank you very
Once
much.
history
Thank
is
you very
gone,
much.
it's gone forever. That's something that
For
most
sure.
people don't listen or hear.
And we know to stop buying junk.
That's right.
No, please don't.
All right,
Keep in
thank you
mind that
very
St.
much.
Croix was one of the top 3 furniture producers in the Caribbean. I can't say second, but Barbados and Trinidad were other great things. But St. Croix, some of the finest furniture you've ever seen made there. Everybody comes there and collects it, takes it away. Well, as St. Croix to me does a better job with preserving culture. But all your grandmother's furniture, you toss out. It worked.
Yeah. And you just have to go to the dump. You can find good things at the dump. You just have to polish or put a
I
little
won't tell
elbow
you which
grease in.
dumps to look at.
Those are yours, huh? Thank you
Those are
very,
mine.
very much.
Thank you so much for allowing me this opportunity.
You're quite welcome. And like I said, Secretary Imani Daniel will be getting in
Mhm.
touch with you, and we're going to set up
Okay.
a walk. That would be very
Yeah.
nice. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Do it early in the morning. Thank you.
Ooh, okay.
Okay. Bye
Thank
bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
I'll be off for just a few seconds so that I can escort Felipe out and to give him something.
Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Since member Richardson joined and member Hendricks and I, so we do have a quorum at our meeting. This was really interesting. Let's take a minute to catch ourselves and stretch because this has been really, really a lot. And Bonnie Corbeil said, Felipe, your honesty reverberates what I see happening. Why we need to structure government so it works more effectively. We have so many laws, little reinforcement. Thank you so much. So we'll pass it on to him, Bonnie. Thank you so much. We'll take 1 minute to collect ourselves after that fantastic presentation. Put us some music. So much knowledge. Once we're catching our breath, if we can have Imani, I don't know if you can put up the 5th Constitution on the right and the work that we are doing on the 6th on the left. And we're looking at Articles 4, 5, 6, and 7. I mean, Section 4, 5, 6, and 7 of Article 14. That's our concluding article today. While you're catching your breath.
Great. So would you mind sharing your screen, and I will be looking at it and walking us through it?
Okay, let me see if Mr. Wells can do that.
Thank you so much.
All right, can everyone see on the left, we have the 5th drafting, and then on the middle, we have the proposal from Daniel for the 6th. Is everyone seeing that?
Yes.
Great. Okay, whenever you're ready, Amani.
Okay, great. So just to recap a bit, we agreed in section 1. If we could, let's scroll up to section 1 and let's just do a recap, because we did take a quick detour in the committee to do the preamble, and that was a lot of fun. And so I think we have finished the first draft of the preamble, if I'm correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Great. And so now we've come back to Article 14 on culture. So previously, we agreed on section 1, which was the Declaration of Cultural Sovereignty. Then we agreed on section 2, which was cultural rights and responsibilities. And then section 3 was the Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute. This Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute was something that the 5th Constitutional Convention came up with. It was in the 5th draft, and I read through it and I really liked it. And so I just pulled it over and made it a bit more clear, and made it more aligned with the way that we've been drafting our Constitution. And so we all agreed on the way that the Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute was structured. And now we're talking about how that institute's governing body will be composed and represented. And then we'll talk about the funding and legislative mandate, intersectional cultural justice, and then cultural documentation and definition. Now, I will say before we get into this, we've had many government structure committee meetings since I drafted this, that I think might change a bit of my opinion on some of these sections as we go through it. Just because I think Delegate Wells, specifically, you've been there. Well, I guess most of the delegates here, we've all been there for these conversations around local government, how we built the SAGE Commission, how we're dealing with the election system and the education system, right? So we might want to take some of what we've learned there and apply it to this cultural conversation.
For sure, yes.
So the conversation we had before on section 4 for composition and representation, we had jotted down that we wanted there to be a number of members, that the selection process could be appointed equally by these folks. I think it should be updated now that we've heard from Mr. Ayala, right? Then we were talking about the term length, thinking through staggered terms, or if we wanted term limits. And then I have a note that we stopped here on this discussion at the last conversation. Mm-hmm. So any questions about where we've been, conversation?
Well, the Felipe, with the Virgin Islands Historic Preservation Commission, I didn't even know that we had a St. Thomas Historical Trust where Luan was. So that was new knowledge for me today. And I neglected to ask the difference between the Historic Preservation Commission and the Historical Trust. And I penned a question here. Can anyone answer to that?
Yeah, I think he was saying that the Virgin Islands Historic Preservation Commission is an extension of the government that is charged with historic preservation, and the St. Thomas Historic Trust is a private.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. It would seem like they would be sort of work in parallel, depending on their mandate. I probably need to check with Luan and find out some about that. But I think I personally would like to suggest that the term limits be 4 years for the that was our stopping point last time. The Historical Preservation Commission, 4 years. staggered terms. I agree with that. And the term limit will be, once you're on there, 4 years, you can get off, or you can be reappointed for another 4 years. That would be my suggestion.
I'm starting to think we should look at term limits holistically. Like, we keep having, every time there's a position, we have to consider the term length, whether it's staggered or not, and the term limit. And I kind of just want to put them all in a spreadsheet and see if it just makes sense to make them equal.
I think that would be great.
Well, sorry, I'm not saying
Put
I
it
have
in
time to do that, but
the spreadsheet, so that all of the positions and all of the commissions will be the same. Is that what you're saying?
well, I was saying it would be nice, yes. So I'm not sure if that's doable. But I think we just need to agree as a collective how we feel about term limits.
Well, let's hear from the delegates. Akima Richardson.
I believe during our last discussion for this committee, it was discussed that they should have a limit of 4 years.
Exactly.
So I'm wondering if it would be one term, but then again, there was conversation around them having 5 terms for the purpose of becoming well versed and, a continual resource on historic preservation. But I would be in support of having terms, to answer the question.
Thank you. Rudel, what's your thought on this?
Yeah, for this specific area, I'm okay with term limits, but it needs to be a larger term limit, so maybe like 4 or 5, because again, this is very nuanced areas of Virgin Islands culture and heritage, and we might not be able to fulfill those seats if we have strict term limits, such as what we are trying to impose on the governor of the Virgin Islands currently.
Thank you. Member Belado de O'Neill, what's your thought on that? Guess you're on mute, probably.
Hello?
Yes, what's your thought about term limits or the length of term?
Madam Chairman, I believe in term limits, and I kind of wanted to ask Mr. Ajala the composition of the historical preservation. And the reason for that is sometimes we don't want to say certain things, but when we had that argument in the legislature, it was based on the fact that the group was, or the legislature, senators that were involved in all of that was 2 people that are not my color. And the sentiment of the people was that this was going to be for the white people to come in, preserve these buildings, and then purchase them and take them away from the people. I've noticed that what Mr. said hasn't gone that way, but we have to be very careful. And yes, I am for term limit, but not more than 5 years, because what we should do, or what we should maybe suggest, is that we have a training program with the preservation, so that younger people from school or the college can come in and be oriented by these members that are serving, so that when they come out, that these younger people can step in after they have been trained about the historical buildings, our history. And we have a lot of history. I have traveled almost all over the world, and when I see things out there, I said, how come in the Virgin Islands we have the same thing like Mr. Ajala said, but we don't preserve them, we don't protect them, we don't care about them, and our young people are not into that. They are into something else. So we need to start from this early ages of education to see how we can entice the younger generation to look at these buildings and history and love them so that they can preserve them for the next generation. Yes, I am for term limit. Thank you.
Imani, you didn't say what you thought. You just said you. What's your take on that?
I don't think we should have term limits on anyone other than the governor.
Well, you said it. You sound like Miss Danielle there. Okay, so are we going to? Well, we had three, 4. So I guess we'll suggest between 4 and 6 years.
Sorry, so the term length is 4 years. And so the question is, how many terms are people able to serve? So and people were kind of giving answers in years. So it's either they get to serve 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, 16 years, right? Right.
Well,
I think Rudell said 4 or 5 terms. I think Rudell did say that.
Yes.
Delegate Wells, what was yours?
I said 4, but that's 16 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think 2 terms, between 2 and 5 terms.
Right.
What do you think?
Ms. Wells, did you said 5 terms of 4 years each?
Well, 5 terms. If the length of the term length is 4 years. We agreed on that. But if we have the limits, how many of those? If you do 4, that would be 16. 4 4 is 16. So I'm saying 2 for the term limit.
Oh, I thought you said 5, because that would be 20.
5, between 2 and 5 term limit.
Okay.
Any other suggestions?
Well, I will vote for 4 terms if that's how Delegate Wells and Delegate Hodge are voting, and then we can move forward. The reason, and I'll just say it again because I'm not sure who was at which meetings, but the reason that I would advocate for no term limits or lengthy terms here is because we're talking about the Institute, the Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute. Right? So usually you have term limits because you want to limit the risk of corruption. You want to and takeover and tyranny, right? We're talking about the Cultural Heritage Institute. I actually hope for the opposite here, where we can have longevity and we can have intergenerational connection at this Cultural Heritage Institute, which means ideally that some people would be there for maybe 16 or 20 years, and not all the time, but it could happen and it could be useful. And I don't want them to have a constitutional amendment because somebody wants to stay on the board a little bit longer.
Well, I understand your concern, and you're saying no term limit because you serve until you just take yourself off.
Right, and I think these boards are either elected or appointed. I think we said appointed by a few people, but again, we are asking people often to remove themselves for risk of tyranny. And I think that the people of the Virgin Islands can self-correct an Institute of Cultural Heritage. I believe we are competent enough for that. So I'm not too worried about a takeover here, right? And so I do think it would be beneficial to have no term limits. You've
convinced me because of the type of board it is. I would vote also for no term limits for this particular board also because of the type of board it is. Akima, what would you say?
Delegate Wells. So, question: what is the ultimatum? What is the ultimatum?
I didn't understand what you said.
What is the ultimatum? So, what are
the term length is 4 years, but if they have no term limit, they would just serve until the person decides that, well, I can't serve anymore, and then they'll be off and they'll have somebody else, rather than similarly like in the Board of Election, your term length is 4 years. Then if you want to serve again, you have to go and seek re-election because of course the different type boards. So I too can be convinced that there should be no term limit on this particular board.
Okay. I will say you can come back to me on this. But just to clarify, you said there will be one term, which is 4 years,
Uh-huh.
or no terms at all, correct?
No. One term, and then if you want to serve past that one term, you just can.
Okay,
Until the
I got
individual probably decides they don't want to serve anymore, and then they'll just resign from the board or the commission.
So is there a way that if this person is no longer fulfilling the mission, is there a way that they can be removed, or do they, because like you said, there's no way for them to reach a limit. So in the event that they're not a suitable candidate, are you saying that they will be stuck in the position unless otherwise stated?
Well, I would think that the commission would have probably rules and regulations about how they should govern themselves. And that would be something would be in the rules and regs of the commission itself, not something that's mandated or or put into the constitution that they have to do. They'll just, if we have somebody, if someone's on a commission, for an example, and there's nothing about them attending X amount of meetings. They have to come to a meeting or they have to do something. Then the person just won't go. But I would imagine that the composition of the commission would be that they'll have rules that would govern themselves, and in that they would see whether the person will fulfill their obligation, because you have to have a quorum, and because you can't have a quorum because somebody's not coming or a few people aren't coming to the meetings, then you have to do something about that
Correct.
internally.
Correct. So of those two options, I do support a, a limitless amount of terms, if that makes sense.
Okay. So we have two, and Member Hendricks is seen, Felipe out. So will you put on your screen, Imani, Member Bilato de O'Neill, did you understand about the term limits also? Okay, she probably has her mute on. Can you put next to term limit in parentheses, no term limit there until we get Member Hendricks' thought on that, Imani?
Okay, I had to step away. What was Delegate Richardson? What was your answer?
Since my explanation, she was for no term limits either. They would
Okay.
self-govern themselves according to their bylaws. So
Okay,
just put after term limits there where you have a red, well, it shows up right here. In parentheses, put no. And then we could move on. So you convinced us, Imani.
thank you. I appreciate everyone being so open-minded, truly. I really do. Before we move forward, we agreed, I think we agreed because it's written here and we had moved on to terms, but the selection process as it stands right now is appointed equally 7 to 9 members by governor, legislature, university, and then that Virgin Islands Historic Preservation Commission.
Yes.
How do we feel about that given all that we know now?
I think the commission needs to be in there. I didn't get a feeling that the commission was doing a lot of, what should I say? Doing a lot. But they need, I think the persons who would be on the Historical Preservation Commission would know persons in the territory who would be good candidates to serve. So I think we need to leave the Virgin Islands Historical Preservation Commission there.
Okay. Yeah, if no one's opposed to that, we can move forward. So I'm
Yes,
going
I'm
to
good.
delete this number of members because we have it up here as 7 to 9. So I
Yes,
feel
that
like
was
we agreed
passed.
on it. From what I remember, we were reading through this. I only submitted this paragraph, shall be defined by law. And I think Devin or Delegate Carrington would preferred that we outlined it here instead of leaving it up to the legislature. And so that's why we began the exercise of the selection process, the term length, and the functions.
Because he
So
wasn't cool with just defined by law.
I think he at least wanted to explore it. I really don't remember. We'd have to go back and watch the videos,
Mhm.
or just ask him at the next meeting, right?
We can.
Shall set policy. And then I guess the function, yeah, we were good with. Shall set
Yes.
policy and direct the function. So
So
open to thoughts from other delegates so that we can move forward on this section.
well, I think I've heard that we're in agreement with the term limit. That was all that we had in question in section 4. So we're ready to go on to section 5. I would wait probably until, because something must have happened with Devin, because he's normally the first one on at 5:30. So probably we can do just that. If you put a note someplace that we'll do that section there with Devin next on August 5th, and then we could move on. In the essence of time, we could move on to the other section.
Okay, great. I think we're going to find similarly for section 5, because I have the same comment there, legislative power. So section 5 is about the funding and legislative mandate for culture. So it says the legislature shall enact enabling legislation and appropriate funds necessary for the operation of the institute and the implementation of its territorial cultural plan. Funding shall be no less than the baseline amount defined by law and sufficient to support cultural programming, research, and community grants. The legislature shall not pass any law that abridges the preservation or development of Virgin Islands culture, history, traditions, languages, or customs.
I didn't hear Felipe say anything about funding from the legislature at all. It just seemed like he was just disgusted with how they handled their appearances at the legislature. Delegate Liliana Bilardo de O'Neill, can you give us some background on? Were you in the legislature when? Yeah, you were. On how that was handled, funding for the commission when they would come before the senators. Are you on mute? Okay, she's not there. So let's. I don't know anything about the funding, and I didn't. So in the essence of time, let's skip 5 then and come back to that when Devin and could be there. And let's move on to 6 then. So we're skipping 5. Okay.
Okay, so section 6 is intersectional cultural justice. It says the government shall recognize and address the connection between culture and social justice, including the roles of language access, environmental heritage, equitable education, and reparative investment. All cultural policies and programs shall consider their potential to redress historical injustice, promote intergenerational equity, and uphold the dignity and contributions of all people of the Virgin Islands.
I am good with that section. Let's hear from other members. Akima.
I am in favor of this as well.
All right. Rudel. You're on mute.
Yes, I have no issues with this.
Okay, so we'll put a plus to that, Imani, and we'll go on to 7.
Okay, hold on, let me change this so we're keeping track. Okay. So section 7 is cultural documentation and definition. So it says the government shall support and maintain a permanent process for the identification, documentation, and definition of Virgin Islands culture, history, and heritage. This process shall be inclusive of oral histories, artistic expression, community traditions, language, and evolving cultural practices across generations and islands. Such efforts shall ensure that cultural preservation is rooted in the lived experience of Virgin Islanders and shall be guided by the principle that culture belongs to the people and must be protected for their benefit, now and in the future. The Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute shall maintain a public cultural registry and archive reflecting the diversity, depth, and development of Virgin Islands culture.
Was there something that was written in the 5th for this section?
So just they proposed the Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute. If we scroll back up to section 3, you'll see on the left the beginning of their section 2.
Oh, yes, I see it.
Yeah, and so it's quite extensive, but we could look through it and see if there's anything missing that we want to pull over. But I
just wanted to know if there was something that was if there was something that was in the 5th. I'm fine with what was being proposed in the 6th. Akima, what about you?
I personally don't have any comments, but I do think it is fine as is currently.
Okay. I don't think Member Hendricks is back yet. Rudell, what do you think of that? That's what's being proposed?
Again, I have no issues with this language.
Okay. So I imagine you can color that your color, and I'll get Member Hendricks' vote when she comes back, so we can move on to the next section. Imani.
Okay, cool. That's the last section actually. So I think we could discuss section 5. It is really simple, and then I can just make a note. But at least the delegates that we do have here can give their input, and we can put in any of their notes down.
Okay, since we have time, we can go back to section 5, funding and legislative mandate.
So I did read it. So I just don't know if anybody has questions or suggestions around how we fund this institute. That's usually a question if we're making a commission or an institute,
Where's the funding coming from? Well, I would like to suggest that some of the funding can come from those EDC beneficiaries who are supposed to be given part of their monies to schools and whatever. We should put that in there. That some of the funding would come from there, probably from the lottery, if we still have lottery 20 years from now.
Yeah, so I didn't mean like the specific sources, although I do agree, but I just meant like the mechanisms on how it gets funded. I think specifically the funding shall be no less than the baseline amount defined by law and sufficient, like that part, and the legislature shall not pass any law that abridges the preservation. I feel like that's similar language that we use or are considering over in education.
What's the baseline amount, did we say?
It says as the baseline amount defined by law.
What does that mean?
Well, I think that we just allow the legislature, similar to how they came up with the Constitutional Convention, they can help come up with the funding or for the institute, or allow the governing body of the institute. I'm not sure. A lot of it is like defined by law. So
Then I would go with whatever we have previously stated, that same language be used here, since we don't know. Well, since we have a clear example of what happened with the Sixth Constitutional Convention and the funding, I don't know how they got to the funding that we got, but how they came upon this number. And since we don't know whatever that baseline is, I would agree it should be the same thing for this cultural institute. Any other member would like to say nay, yay, agree, anything else?
Rudolph put his in the chat.
Oh, let me see. Oh, okay. Funding, enforcement, and continuity, yes. He's having audio problem because of the surroundings, but he thinks that 3 major points was raised: funding, enforcement, and continuity.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Rudel. After listening to Mr. Ayala, I think we need to be a lot more forceful and precise about cultural preservation. And after thinking through how we built the SAGE Commission, I feel differently about how I want to structure this, or how I want to propose structuring this. And I also want to urge everyone else to think about how we should structure this and like actively make suggestions, because I am believing his sense of urgency, and kind of like the same urgency that people have for climate disaster and climate change. Like once history is gone, it's gone forever. That is sticking with me in a new way. So I think I do want to maybe ask if we can extend this and think through more effective constitutional language around cultural protection.
And take a page from the SAGE Commission and probably embellish that to fit the Cultural Commission?
I'm not sure, and I'd like to hear from other delegates. I think what I'm expressing is that right now, the Virgin Islands Cultural Heritage Institute, right, is developing and implementing a cultural heritage plan every 5 years, right? It facilitates the support. I'm up at section 3, where we define the institute. It facilitate and support the integration of VI culture, serves as a consultative body for proposed developments, maintains the Cultural Vitality Index, publishes an annual public report. These are all fantastic things, but none of them, in my opinion, are effective enough to meet Mr. Ayala's urgency demand.
And Kadeem Kamabash asked, can the commission have an appointment by election of direct vote? That's interesting, I think also.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yes, we can.
I think after hearing the conversation by Mr. Ayala, I think it might be best that we actually elevate it from a commission to a board of culture or a systems of culture, and have it as a permanent stay in the Virgin Islands. I think culture is so important to the Virgin Islands, especially how impacted culturally the Virgin Islands has been in comparison to the greater Caribbean. And if we do not do a good job of preserving it, right, we, as Ms. Ayala said, we will lose it forever. So I think it might be a thought experiment to think about making it into, you know, that board or that system like we did for education and we did for elections.
Yeah,
I'm entirely in agreement with that.
Yeah, it's an independent executive office of the government or of the executive branch, and I agree. It would be the culture system of the Virgin Islands if we stay true to our current working titles, which means that Delegate Wells, I think you need to send a letter to Chair Ross.
Yes,
and
yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a great idea, Rudel, which then just completely changes this article. I think we can keep the beginning. which would be the Declaration of Cultural Sovereignty, Cultural Rights and Responsibilities. And then I think after that, we get into the culture system of the Virgin Islands.
I thoroughly agree. Once I get some language from everybody else, and I wouldn't bring it up at plenary, but I'm going to send it I'll send, well, plenary until Saturday. I have some time to probably do some work and get in some information from the other persons, whether you're a committee member or not, crafting this letter, because I think it's very, very important. And after hearing Mr. Ayala's plea, excuse me, I agree. I agree with that, Rudel. Thank you so much. You've set me in a course where I'm going right to this gutter now. Akima, what do you think of that suggestion?
I also agree. I think that once the letter is drafted and they take into consideration the significance of having the institute, I think that once our document is approved, that will be a great asset to everyone here in terms of our cultural preservation.
Right. I hope that I get numerous emails with suggestions from the persons who are on this line, and whether you're a member of the Cultural and Heritage Standing Committee or not, you're a delegate. I want all of the suggestions, because I need to craft it all together in one good, concise email so that it can be accepted. That's what we want, acceptance. And yeah, whenever you think about something you'd like to see, just send it to me, because I'm really buoyed up by that suggestion, Rudel. Very much so. Very much so. Yeah, so we've changed. That's what we're doing. We're just discussing and changing and moving right ahead. So now what are we going to call it? What should we call it? I foresee a suggested base funding amount. I foresee that we will, recommend and suggest probably the terms, just like we did before, like we had passed. I don't know if I don't know if I would change back again to having term limits because of the structure of this, whatever we're calling this. This is going to be very interesting, I think. Very interesting. And of course, we have to have input from the other delegates and also from the public. So this I think is going to be the one that's going to show that the Sixth Constitutional Convention is true about what we want to have come, and what about our culture. Because remember, if we are those who were on yesterday for human rights, we Rupert's question, President Ross's question was, are we saying culture of the people or of our people from the Virgin Islands only, a culture of persons who people who live in the Virgin Islands? Because we have many cultures that are celebrated to a large extent, and I made reference to the Dominicanos, how they have their big parade in St. Thomas. I know that the St. Patrick Day is a big thing on St. John, as it is in St. Croix. So those were discussion items that we had yesterday. So all that I think we would have to take into consideration when we're rewriting this section of our mandate. Imani, would you like to say anything about, or you just Rudel, Akeem, anybody?
Miss Watts, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Oh God, I've been hearing you saying Miss Hendricks is still attending to Mr. Ayala. I could hear everything, but I cannot speak.
You're back where you were before then.
I guess I
Well,
was touching everything.
you probably touched too much. Rudel had an
But what
excellent.
I like what I'm seeing and what I'm hearing, and I see that Felipe's discussion arose a lot of concerns and excitement
Yes, it did. Yes, it
for
did.
us to move forward, and maybe another time it would be nice if we could get him so that he can speak to the whole commission.
Exactly, but I'll have to go through the executive committee. But Mr. Richardson says a suggestion would be humanities system of the Virgin Islands. Rudel's suggestion, or Imani's, cultural system of the Virgin Islands. So you're thinking along the same line. Excellent. We're going to, it was agreed and passed that we should rename this area here, this area and culture. And I'm so excited because culture is a big thing. Yes, we know that. And when history is gone, it's gone forever. That should be our theme. So I'm looking forward to getting suggestions by email or whatever so that I can send a letter, because this has to go now to the executive committee since we're
What are
changing
some
our
of the
whole,
suggestions for the names you said?
right, cultural system of the Virgin Islands or humanities system of the Virgin Islands. And then what would that look like?
Okay.
So I'm asking all members, whether you're a member of the committee or not, to send suggestions on how we're going to broach this, because we want it to pass. And of course, it has to go before, like I said, the executive board. I'm excited. I think Felipe lit a fire on all of us. Because
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I'm just talking, so you can go right ahead.
So I'm looking at our government structure workbook. I'm looking at the proposed language around the education system.
Mm-hmm.
And so just really high level, right? It just defines what the education system should do. And then it talks about how it's composed. Sorry, Dee, I'm on a totally different file for a different committee, sorry. So it talks about how it's composed. It says that there shall be 9 members, and then it talks about the qualifications. Then it talks about the function of the board, right? Then it says that the Board of Education or whatever, we're kind of switching between the language. It's tough for the folks who are listening at home. Shall appoint the Director of Education, and then the director is in charge of the additional staff. The legislature shall provide sufficient funding, and talks about those things. Up for teacher salaries, functional facilities, instructional materials and technology, right? So just all the things you need to make education work. Then it goes on to set a timeline for the legislature to establish this independent system of education. And then that's kind of it, right? Then it gets into just some other government structure things. So I'm just saying that to give people kind of the outline of how the education system is being proposed and how it's been designed. And so I think it could be helpful if we at least mirror that format as we're thinking through. And so we have thought through some of that as a group. If we go down to section 4 on our document, right? So we started off with just kind of the high level purpose on section 4. And then we do get into how it's composed. We said appointed, right? We get into term length. We talk about the function. I think the functions obviously have to be a lot more powerful. But now there's the implication of this cultural system has an entire staff, like the election system or the Department of Education. And so that's what I would really like people to think through. What does that staff do? What are those functions? It's not just like an institute with like a board and a small budget. This is an entire system, independent office, executive office.
Thank you for that. Delegate Hendricks, is there still a Office of Cultural Education in the Department of Education that was in That right there by Polyberg? Do you know?
I don't think so.
Oh, Quabina
Where
had something to do with that.
Myron Jackson had he owns a property or something.
No, coming down when you're coming on before the stoplight. The building is on the left-hand side.
Yeah. When you're coming down, it will be on the right.
No, coming down Polyberg, coming towards the stoplight, not going towards Charlotte Amalie.
Okay. I don't see any activity, but we could find out.
Yeah,
I
that
could
would
remember
be.
they had moved and the street where Criterion store was in the yard right there.
That was
You know
where the
where
commission was.
You know where Aloma owns the property right there?
I don't know where she
The
owns, but I know
Abbots.
where the across from Criterion. Yes,
Right in the yard. You remember there's a yard
across
where
from
Delsa
Desmond
Captain Bay.
Maynard's house. I mean Desmond Maynard's office.
No, on the opposite side now.
Across from Desmond Maynard's office. That
Yes.
white building across the street.
There's a yard.
Yes.
At one point there was something in there.
Can you check on that for us and see about the building at the foot of on the left hand side by the excuse me, on the left hand side by the light, and also that building that was in the yard? What was in there?
Okay. You know the little greenhouse on the street? You know
Yes.
that's Aloma's property, right?
I don't know.
Yes, it
Okay.
is.
Okay. Well,
Jarvis, the Jarvises.
right. Okay. I know there was something where Antonio Jarvis
Yes.
people own that house. I was in down off the street, off the road. I don't know what it is, but they refurbished that, and I don't know.
Okay, I believe
Anyway,
Felipe would know those things, so I would ask him.
yes, and then also the building that's right on the corner before you can take a left to go to Criterion or a right to go to the hospital, the old hospital.
Yes.
Okay, great. Imani, you were saying that what we should do now is look at what we discussed for education in government structure and have it mimic some of the information that's in there.
I was just providing it as an outline. That language was proposed by Delegate Silverman, and we have not had a chance to review it as committee, so it's not at all like vetted or verified. But I do think it covers at least most of the things that should be considered as we're framing this out.
Okay, I agree with that. And Member Hendricks, we need your vote. What was it we needed her for? The term limits? Well, no, that's
Term limits for which committee?
ours. We're looking about section, what was it we were doing, Imani? We were trying to get a full vote.
Right. It was for term limits for the board of the institute, but now we've changed this whole body. So I'm not sure if people's opinions are going to change after it gets redrafted.
Okay, and I have a comment from Bonnie Kubil. I know many, in all caps, St. John citizens who felt really frustrated that laws were made by one legislature, that the VI Department of Education by law was to teach the Fort Berg slave rebellion in 1733. It was never done. You're very correct, Bonnie. Very correct. And that was a law. Okay, well, then we've had consensus on what we had before us, and now because we're going in a different direction, we need to craft all of this information very well so that it could be presented to the executive committee and we can have it passed. We've had suggestions of the cultural system of the Virgin Islands. That would be one thing, or the humanities system of the Virgin Islands. I think those are two good suggestions. If you can think of anything else, anything that you could think of. Don't think that it's you don't want to say. Just send me an email or send it to Imani, and I hope to draft something to the executive committee, in particular, um, the president, prior to Saturday. So whenever you get your thinking cap on, and as Imani like to give homework, you have Thursday and Friday before Saturday. If you can think of anything, just shoot me an email or send it to Imani, because we're not going to I probably won't bring it up on the plenary session, because we wouldn't have everything as we wanted. But so that they could know that we're planning for this, excuse me, to be coming forward. So anything you can think of. Humanities system of the Virgin Islands. It's another suggestion. So any other member would like to give a suggestion or comment about what we need to be doing? We're finished with Article 14. Thank you very much. Now that we have to go back and redo that, but it's all right. We're good for that. Our next meeting is going to be August 5th. I'll see everybody at our plenary session on Saturday. Any closing comments, questions, suggestions? Okay, I'll entertain a motion for us to end this session. We're a little bit early, but that's all right.
Delegate Wells, Chair
Yes.
Wells,
I move that we adjourn.
you had on the agenda funding discussion.
That was that funding that we thought for that section.
Oh, I got you specifically.
Yes, that's what that was. Because
Okay,
we're
cool.
talking about funding for this cultural institute. Yes. I wasn't very clear on that. Sorry.
No worries, no worries.
So there's a motion to adjourn. Is there a second? I can't move, but I can second. So I second, but Rudel and Imani, I always have to say, what else can I say? Thank you so much for facilitating, for doing all the scut work. And I see that Rudel, is now the person for the Human Rights Commission. It's amazing how
Let's say
things.
you like trouble.
And Imani is now the one for government structure. But that's what we said before. We know what we're
You
saying.
like trouble.
Thank you so much.
I
Have a
appreciate
good evening.
Thank you very much. You have a great evening as
All
well.
right.
Thank you for the meeting.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Member Hendricks, for getting Felipe, and we really have to have him come and speak to the entire commission.
Yeah.
So
That's his
Imani's
thing.
going to set that up. I'm giving her more work
I
again.
really would like for us also to get a trip to his home.
Well, you
Y'all
have
will
to work
wow.
on that. You need to work on that, because I've heard about it, because Abigail is his friend, and she told me about it's amazing when you walk in there. Abigail Hendricks in St. John.
Oh yes.
So I know that, and I've heard about it. I like to see it. But see everybody on Saturday, God's willing.
Okay, have a great night.
Have a
Thank
great
you.
night
I
too.
mean,
Okay,
Amani,
thank
are you
you.
going to be present in St. Croix, not on the screen, in person?
You know I don't miss Delegate
Yes,
Hendricks.
she's always there.
You have
And
to.
Rudel, if they can. One good thing we could say about that. All right,
Well,
good night, everybody.
She wears two hats,
Well, she's a secretary and she's a facilitator, the
No,
vice.
chairperson of the other committee.
Yes, she and Rudel.
Vice Chair,
You're
yes.
you're going to jail too.
All right. Well, have a great night, ladies.
All right, you too.
Okay.
Bye-bye.